started. Good afternoon, guys. We are back, and I believe this is our 10th week with our 12-week summer series, What Happened to You? I'm so excited because, as you know, we are still in discussion about our book, What Happened to You, written by Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Bruce Perry. As we always say, this is a book that mesmerized and enlightened the minds of its readers after being asked the question so often, what's wrong with you? And now, because of the amazing work that the authors performed, the question has become, what happened to you? We salute the CEO of TDR Brands International, our own Tierra Destiny Reed, for her vision of When Women Heal. And When Women Heal is a safe haven where women are able to connect and they heal and they grow and they just become so empowered, stepping into their own identity. And for those of you that do not know me, I am Dr. Glenice Harris Wilson, a media host for When Women Heal, and I am associate professional counselor, pastoral counselor, and a professional coach, where I am the founder and CEO of Living Connected LLC. On behalf of the amazing, phenomenal Tierra Destiny Reed, we want to invite you to go to our Facebook page, the When Women Heal community. Also, please visit our website at whenwomenheal.com. So today, guys, we are so excited as we get ready to go into this week. I have with me the beautiful and amazing Renee Bradford. Listen, just talking to her before we came on, I am so excited about tonight. We have a lot that I'm quite sure that we're going to be doing some deep dive into with our conversation. So I want to welcome you, Renee. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much. It is more than a pleasure to be here. I'm so excited.
All right, so let's get ready to dive in. As you well know, the book, What Happened to You, early in childhood, sometimes children become traumatized during childhood. And as they begin to grow, they start to process and they start to get their own image and perception of those circumstances and situations that occurred early on in life. And through our own mental processes, the way in which we think and remember and know and judge and how we try to resolve our own problems, what they're telling us in the book is that there is a higher call or higher recall of perception that's related to stress and the early trauma. the book helps to clarify in depth what happened to you so that um, we can understand why we do things, and more so why we do things the way we do things. Just trying to
Absolutely.
reshift the focus as you start to process this. So, what is your story behind our topic of what happened to you?
Well, that is such a great question, Dr. Glennis. And what happened to me as a young child is I found myself in the foster care social services home system at about 9 or 10-ish years old. I don't remember the exact age. I probably blocked a little bit of it out. I found myself there after watching my mom um, experience what was called a nervous breakdown. Then my brother and I floated around and had the fortunate luck of a babysitter who took us in for a little bit. And then my father came and got us, and he just couldn't, he felt like he couldn't do it. He couldn't be a parent. And so what happened to us is we ended up in the foster care system for a while until my grandmother rescued us. But what happened to me as a result of that is I started right then and there. The way I internalized it was I have to take matters into my own hands. And immediately I started thinking, believe it or not, at that young age, what do I need to do so that I don't have to experience this ever again, or my children, or what can I do? I immediately turned inside of myself. And that's the story of my life. So I am the person that can make a difference in my life. And so those are the positives from it. But some of the other, I'll call it residue from it, is being a little performance based, right? Um, and really having very high expectations of myself because I don't want to disappoint, right? And especially my grandmother is the one who took us in.
Mhm.
And so I lived my whole life. I still think to this day, she's not here. I do things in a way that I always want her to be smiling and be proud. And so that's how I internalize what happened. One of the things, there's a lot of things, but the good thing that I internalized too is my life is all about service. I just started recognizing that in these later years, I'm always looking to serve at my job, at my church. I don't need a title. I don't need somebody to anoint me or appoint me. I'm always looking for how can I make somebody else better, and how can I leave things better than I found them.
So, Renee, what I hear you saying is that I try to serve people, help people. Um, Early on, you said with your grandmother, I want to make sure she's always smiling on me.
Yes.
A lot of times we find ourselves developing the people pleasing
Hmm.
mentality.
Yes.
I don't hear it so much from a negative side where you want to please, you want to serve. With your grandmother, it was not a matter of I have to live every day to please my grandmother. That's not what I'm hearing. I'm
No.
hearing every day because of her sacrifices, because she took us in knowing that she wanted better for us. She wanted us to be together. She wanted to bring us back into the fold of our family. This is
Yes.
not about trying to please grandmother. This is about trying to help her to be pleased with us for the life that she allowed us to live, is what I hear you saying.
And you're absolutely right. It wasn't a burden. I actually think it was a great thing for me. If I had to internalize anything, I always wanted her to be proud of me, so to speak. Her and my grandfather, I felt like, wow, you did this magnificent, most beautiful thing to take us in after you've raised your own children. And this was her second husband, so he never had children. And he was older than her. And they took not just took us in, but just made a whole life For these, you taking two by that time, teen, preteen, by the time we got there, and just made a beautiful family life for us. And I was always, from the minute I got there, I was just grateful. And so my response had always been, I don't want to do anything to disappoint her. My grandmother or grandfather, I always want them to know by not by just my words, but by how I live my life and what I achieve, like what you did was phenomenal. And I am the fruit of the tree that you planted. And I want you to look and go, wow, that was one of the best decisions I ever made. So I lived like that. I did.
And tell me again, how old were you when you went to foster care?
So probably I'm going to think it was about 10 or 11. And I say that, I mean, I guess I could probably go back and try to peel back the onion, but some of that I just kind of don't and didn't because it wasn't important to me. I think this last couple of years, what's been important to me is when I look back and I see how God has had his hand interwoven in everything I've done. I want people to know I want people to know my story as a gift to them, as a gift to humanity, to understand that you can have traumatic circumstances and situations, but sometimes it's to look through those and see how you ended up on the other side, and that those things that were meant for evil, that God had a plan. And the plan was for you to come out thriving and striving. And I can't be quiet now. I can talk about it in a way I think that can bring glory, but also I don't want to also say anything. I'm not mad at my dad. I'm not mad at my mom, and I never have been. But I was able to go back and look at how God's hand was in so many things. At the time, I didn't understand it, but I always faced forward. I was blessed to do that. But now that I look back and see everything, I want to tell my story because I think that there's a lot of people, we all go through things, right? Rain falls on the just and the unjust, right? But it's just another way to think about things and look back and look through and say, but here's where I am now. And I look at it and I'm grateful my dad did that. It sounds horrible, but what kind of life would I have had with someone who felt like they couldn't care for me?
Right. Now,
Um,
at what age were you able to process this? Because at 10, 11, when all of this was going on, you probably didn't have the mindset on how God reigned in our lives, right?
yes.
So at 10, 11, how were you trying to think about this? Because you didn't know about processing your thoughts. So I'm going to use the term, how were you thinking about all this?
Yes. So at 10 and 11, I was sitting there thinking, what do I, Renee, need to do so
Mm,
that this will not happen to anyone else? And better yet, no one in my family or in my span of control of my world. And I started thinking, well, let me look at successful people and what do they do? So it was like, oh, there's people with a mom and a dad and they look happy. Or the other one was education. I started realizing the first thing I latched onto that I felt like I had control over was education. And it was like, oh, okay, so people that are educated, they get a house, they have a family. And I latched on to that, and that was the first thing I latched onto. And education was the primary vehicle I felt that was going to help me achieve the goal of not having this happen again. So I don't know. I'm going to say it was something maybe in my inherent personality where I immediately thought of, how can I prevent this? I'm not going to think about why me. I'm going to think about why this won't be me again or anybody I know.
So what happened after your grandmother removed you all from foster care? How old were you when she took you off from foster care?
So I'm going to say I was about 12,
Okay. So
11. We were there. Again, we bounced around. We were probably in foster care a year,
mhm,
year and a half.
Mhm.
And then, and during that last part of the time there, we were making home visits to my grandmother because that was part of the process. And they were going through a guardianship process, almost like an adoption to make sure their home was fit.
Mhm.
So that was like weekend visits and visits with the, social worker, but we still lived, with the state of New York, so to speak.
So when your grandmother was able to get guardianship of you guys, what was the relationship like with you and your brother and your mom and your dad? Was that
So
ever?
my mom at the time, again, we were kids. She was in the hospital later to find out it was a mental hospital. So she was there. And
Mhm.
she, I later found out she suffered from paranoid schizophrenia.
Mhm.
And so she was in the hospital for years, from what I remember. I didn't see her again for years. My father was never really in our lives. He would come back and forth. When we lived with my mother, and by the way, the 9 years I was with my mother was amazing. She, from the time I can remember, she was this beautiful, stunning woman. She took pride in us and everything. We enjoyed New York City immensely. There wasn't a play, there wasn't a Radio City music hall, there wasn't anything we didn't do. She just felt like, her job was to expose us. We lived in the projects, but we weren't of the projects. We were just like transported there to sleep. And so when I even look back now, I could see why she was just being so perfect.
Mhm.
She was so perfect. I thought she woke up, like people say I woke up like this. I only saw my mother looking like she was always ever, 100% perfect. Everything was perfect. We were perfect. When I look back, I believe that, was had a lot to do with what happened to her.
Mhm.
And then I later learned she suffered a lot of abuse growing up. So that I didn't find out till maybe 15 years ago.
Do you know where her abuse came from?
Her home, her mom, it was in the home. And that is all I know from her social worker.
Mhm.
I lived a life with being a grown woman. So, as I told you, I was like, how can I prevent this from happening? So, one of the results of that was that my husband and I, we came to Georgia and got this house. I had two little girls. Next thing I had my nephew, I had my cousin, my brother. And in our family, it's kind of a joke, but in a good way. And they like, if you don't have anywhere to live, you could go live with Renee and Dwayne. And it became like this. Actually, we looked at it as a compliment, right? And literally, one family reunion, my one aunt gave us a plaque, like, thank you for
Oh, wow.
taking in so many people. But it's funny, we didn't look at it that way. It was like, if I have any way I can help you,
Mhm.
I will. And if I have any way I can help make you a better person, I will. And I look at what happened to me and my brother, and I said, my grandmother made a difference by
Mhm.
just extending her open arms. I can do that.
Mhm.
I can do that. And so I took that on in many, many ways.
I don't want to get a lot into your literary work, right? But I do. So I'm gonna tread real lightly on this one.
Okay.
But I do, because something you stated, and I'm only going to deal with the statement that you made, but I want you to expound on your thought of you help people to focus on the blessing versus the tragedy. All
Yes.
right, so let's look at the trauma, because when we think about the book, what happened to you, they broke it down in three parts, being the trauma, resilience, and the healing. So why do you feel that when people are traumatized, or they go through struggles, or they have obstacles in their way, as life goes on, we always focus on the tragedy. We focus on the trauma. We don't unpack that enough to see where there was some blessings kind of laying underneath
Yes.
all of the rough stuff. Why do you feel people focus more on the tragedy?
I think what happens is you get stuck in, like, you go through a trauma or tragedy, And like with me and my brother, I could get stuck in the foster care system. I could be there 40 years, so to speak. And just to be very transparent, my brother still is. So while I'm telling you my story of how I processed it, he didn't process it the same way.
Mhm.
And I have spoken to him many times, and he says, I don't know how you could just move forward and not think of all these things. He's like, my mom, our dad, this, that, and the other, and why he thinks why these things all happen to him. He said, but you don't look at it that way. And so even through the years of going back and forth with him, and he lived with me for 2 times in our lives, but he lived with me about 5 years ago. And I realized a lot of times when I was talking to him, he was still the little boy, honestly, that was back in that situation. And it was because he never passed the trauma. So I believe it's like you get stuck there, and sometimes you need help, and there's nothing wrong with that. And that's something I had been talking with him about, because I happen to take it like, okay, what can I do? And he took it like, why is this happening?
Mhm.
And he still is in, why did this happen? That's where he lives.
How did you get past the trauma?
For me, I had one able to look forward, but not just that. I believe in the point where I was looking at what happened to me and saying, okay, how can I prevent this? And then I started feeling like I was taking some action. I felt like I was moving forward, but not just only that. I also think a life of serving, so being able to serve other people always made me feel better that look what I'm able to do to help someone else so that they don't have to experience what I did in any way, shape, or form. And the other thing is, in this later part of my life, is I've had the ability of even having my brother live with me. I started thinking, well, why am I taking it this way, right? And why is he still stuck there? What is it we're doing differently? If there's some secret sauce, I better share, right? And one of the things that helped me was I didn't know, when I talk about God, I didn't know God then. I didn't know what any of that. But once I did get to know God, and I do have a relationship with him, that's when I started having more introspective thoughts about, wow, there were so many times where God showed his hand, like my grandparents, and a whole lot of other spaces and places, like the babysitter or whatever, people who showed us love. I was able to look at that as a blessing. And when I was talking to my brother, I was like, do you realize how blessed we are? Like, with grandma taking us in. I mean, we could focus on what daddy did, but then we can focus on what grandma did. And if we do that, let's look at your life and my life. And I don't know, in those conversations, I started realizing there's a word out there for me to share. And maybe some other people can take and look at, hey, let me look at the results of my life. That was tragic, but let me see where I am now. And let me look at those things I could be grateful for. And yeah, that was bad, but then there was good after it. Mm-hmm. And even if the good is that you go serve somewhere and help someone else to process their trauma, right? That's a good. Or even if the good is for me, even having empathy for my dad, realizing he didn't know what to do, but he felt like he couldn't be a parent. And to someone else, they might go, oh, I'm never going to forgive him. That's traumatic. To me, I'm like, I totally forgive him. Because look where I'm at now. Was that a beautiful thing to be in foster care? No. But what is beautiful is my life now. And that's where I'm going to focus. So I think some of it for me was focusing on the good, focusing on the gratitude, focusing on the end result versus the thing that happened, 50 years ago almost, right? I can stay there, or I can come into the current day and look at the blessing. So I think one thing might be, look at where you are now. Look at what you're doing now. Maybe write down some things you're grateful for that have happened.
Mhm.
So my dad did that, but then my grandmother took us in, and I had two people that were home all the time. So my grandfather worked, a 4 to 12 shift, and my grandmother worked 9 to 5. And even though it annoyed me in high school, I couldn't get in but so much trouble. Now, I wasn't perfect, but believe me, when they said latchkey kids, I was one of the only people I knew that somebody was sitting in front of a clock waiting for me to get home. And you better not be 1 minute late, right?
So,
So there's a blessing.
yeah, and it was sound like it was difficult for your brother to make that shift.
He still has not. Still has not. And my prayer is, even at this time in his life, I'm still talking to him. He finds himself now. Now in the last months, he wanted to die. And so he just let himself go, to the point where a couple of months ago, I was running up to New Jersey. He was found unresponsive. But when I got to the hospital, I was like, do you want to live? Because I knew what happened to him. I knew where he was. And he said, yes, I do now. I didn't want to, but I do. Well, but there's the consequence of what happened to him, though. Now is he's in a rehabilitation program now, because he couldn't walk. He let himself go that far. He's starting to walk, he's eating, he's dressing himself, but he has a journey now. And I'm praying for him. And what I've been saying to him is, you're not alive by accident, buddy. You'll have a story to tell. And you have a journey, but we're all here. And he's now like, I want to be here. He's fighting now. He's fighting now.
It's amazing. And
It is.
I'm going to pray for your brother, because
Thank you.
his story can be used in ways, even with young boys. His story can be such an example to help so many, both boys and girls, that come up in this type of environment, this type of predicament, that don't have that grandparent to rescue them.
Yeah, and even with my grandparents that rescued us, he could never focus on that part. He was always back in the why did they? And again, I think we all are different, right? We all present differently. And I think that's one thing that we can help each other, right? Is when someone isn't processing their scenario or their tragedy, they need help. And I think there was a lot of times we knew that. But my brother also, like a lot of us, handsome, looked like he was fine, but he wasn't. Inside, he was dying a slow death inside.
I think the beauty in this, that I salute you, Renee, for, is that although you saw the blessing in the misery, your brother did not. I salute you for still always keeping your hand on your brother, because
Oh, yeah.
you came out on the positive side.
Yes.
Your brother is still having his struggles. You haven't let go of him.
No, and I won't.
It's like someone saying, we were together then and we're going to be together now. And
Yes.
I'm grateful that you have that heart of sisterly love to give to your brother.
Yes.
It's like you've taken what was instilled in you, and I'm going to keep instilling it into my brother until he gets it, until he understands that life can be different once
Yes.
you settle into the fact that change can manifest.
Absolutely. And I will tell you, it's almost like I am his mother figure, so to speak, in terms of how he even treats me, how he looks at me. He is definitely looking forward now, I believe for sure, but it's also helping me to realize that we need to reach people where they are. And it's also important for me to tell my story as a gift to humanity, for people to realize there is another way to process trauma. What happened to you happened. That is for sure. But now there may be some other thinking as you process it that can help you move out of that stuck space into a space of, yep, that happened. I'm not saying it didn't, believe me. But on the other side of that, I've seen gratitude, grace, goodness in people. And I've even seen a life that I never thought I would have because I was so focused on getting here. Right? I mean, sometimes you putting your head down and doing stuff and you forget to look up and go, hey, I'm doing great. And so I am in this moment and I'm appreciative of this moment. I'm appreciative of my life. And I have had many other things happen as well. But I do believe the resilience for me is in the, I'll sum it up to say that I can fall on the floor, I'll fall down, I'll cry, then I'm wiping my eyes going, okay, what do I need to do to get the scars healed and keep moving forward? So that's my next step. After I'm gonna cry for a minute, and then I'm facing forward. And so whatever from that I can offer to people in that way of processing, or taking a look at the finished product, finished meaning where you are at this time, and saying, you know what, I got a degree. I have a great family. I have an awesome husband. Yeah, I was in foster care for 2 years, but I've been living a beautiful life for 30 or 40. I want to focus there, so that, not to simplify, but to give another perspective. For some people, just to have another perspective is what will help them to process their trauma and go, yeah, that happened, but wow, look at me now.
I saw a post the other day and the person said, I've been down. I was down, but I did not stay there. So that's
Exactly.
like saying, I take ownership that I was down. Yep,
Mhm.
it happened. I was there. I was down, but I
Absolutely.
took ownership not to stay down. I did something
Absolutely.
about it. I wanted to see a change and I had to make the change. So
Yes.
once we start taking that ownership of our own lives, then we can start seeing some progress in directions that we really want to see ourselves go, right?
Absolutely.
I noticed in your bio again that you talked about being in a position to educate, empower, and to create an awareness to drive change. What have you seen as the main struggle hindering change? And I think you pretty much kind of center in on women, right?
Yes.
What do you feel has been the main struggle that hinders people from changing?
Well, the main struggle that I feel hinders people from changing is, one, sometimes you're around people that remember you as you were, or where you are, or the trauma you were in, and they cannot see you differently. And therefore, the reflection you see when you are with them is that situation or trauma or tragedy. And so that's one hindrance. And the other hindrance is us, right? Sometimes realizing that we have the power and we have the control to change ourselves, and change how we look at things and change our circumstances. And we sometimes don't take that power. We will stay in a circumstance that is long ago and still talk about it like, suppose you grow up and I have a relative like this, and they felt like they were always kind of the ostracized child or whatever. And you grow up and you tell them, I'm the black sheep, I'm the ostracized person, I'm the bad person. And you start owning that.
Mhm.
And it's almost like you've self-fulfilled a prophecy, right? You create that. So those are a lot of reasons why, we don't have change in our lives.
Mhm.
But I'll tell you another big reason. As I work with a lot of women in employee resource groups at my job, and one of the things we learned is when we want to change women, the first thing we wanted to do was we're going to, educate women and empower women, and all that is true. But the biggest change is when we can get men and women at the table together so that we can all have an epiphany or an aha moment together to realize it takes all of us. If you have all women talking to women about changing women, sounds real great, but guess who's signing the paychecks and doing the promotions, right? So one of the big things that I have been doing this last year or two is really bringing more men and executives and people of decision-making authority to the table and saying, these are some of the issues, how will we change them? And really driving change from the top down.
And see, the thing about it is, what I've noticed a lot in people, especially clients that I work with, a lot of people see change as stressors.
Yes.
Right? They can, whether it's in their finances, in their job, in their career, in job loss, personal health situation, family problems, and the list goes on and on and on. They see these changes that need to take place as stressors.
Yeah.
But there are good stresses and there are bad stresses. It all depends upon how you look at the situation and circumstances. What lens are you looking out of? If I'm looking out of it as negative, I'm going to process it in negative ways. But if I'm looking at the change as the betterment of myself, my life, or my family, or whatever, then I'm going to look at that through the lens of positive change. So, taking on change in by means of stressing, depend on how you look at it, depends on the shift in the direction. So
yes.
if I'm looking at it negative, I'm going to shift in a negative direction, and I can make poor decisions. I can, I can bring more harm than good if I shift it in a negative way.
Yes, and one of the things I learned many years ago that I found interesting in one of the corporate classes I took, that there's good stress and bad stress. And one of the things they said is it doesn't matter, it's still stress. Mm-hmm. And one of the other things I think I heard Oprah say once, or that she learned, is stress is wanting the circumstance to be different than it is. So as an example, if you're sitting in traffic and you're running late, you're stressed, but you're wishing, I want to be there on time. I wanted to be there, but you can't change the traffic and you're sitting in it. So it's almost like if you can surrender to that moment and surrender to the situation and accept, I'm sitting in traffic and I'm going to be late. Now, what am I going to do? Am I going to pick up the phone? What can I do? Or I'm going to sit in traffic and be like, oh my gosh, hope I get there. You might get there on time, but by the time you walk in that meeting, your brain is fried, right? But if you take control of the situation and say, I think I might be late. I'm sitting here. I can't change it. May put on some good music, but before I do, let me call the people I'm meeting and let them know I'm running late, whatever I need to do. But sometimes we will sit in the stress and allow the stress to take us over, and then it ends up that the situation was going to be fine anyway, right? Sometimes the things we fear the most have never even happened.
Right.
So I think that's one of when I heard that, I'm like, that is profound. So for me, some things we can do to avoid stress, right? One of my mantras I have now is I don't get anywhere late. I'm never late. I try to be 15 minutes early or 30 minutes early. That sounds so simple. Do you know that one thing right there is it has released so much anxiety in my life, because I'm not running out the door. I used to be like, okay, well, I'll just time it out. And then if anything goes wrong, now you're scrambling, where now I try to leave enough time. If I left something, I can almost turn around and come back. I may be sitting places early, but boy, that is so much more peaceful than the stress that I can cause.
Listen, when I worked for corporate America, it taught me about being on time.
Yes, ma'am.
And I am so time conscious. I don't even know if I ever break it. I think it's, in a way, I think it is good, because if I allow myself that 15, 30-minute window, that keep me from being stressed.
Yes, it's amazing how now you can't prevent everything.
Yeah.
And then when you can't, it's also almost like the serenity prayer. Just to realize, okay, here I am, my child's gonna get an F, or I'm in this argument, or whatever. I bounced the check, I don't have money for this, or whatever the issue is, you're there.
Mhm.
So it's like, okay, I'm here now. Now what? And I find that so empowering when I can do that.
Mhm.
I can like actually free my mind to be clear, to come up with ideas to move forward versus staying in a stressful state.
Right, right. I remember reading the book Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg, right?
Yes.
And that's an amazing book as well.
Yes.
However, she talked about what it means to lean in. And she said that is when you're destined, it's about wanting to change in a manner of doing what you say you can't do and doing what you can do.
Mhm.
How do you feel about, or what is your ability? How would you describe your ability to change or to handle changes?
Oh, first of all, I am a routine person. For a matter of fact. Well, one thing I learned from being in corporate America from day one is we change because change is what you can do all the time to say you're doing something different, A, or B, to show your fingerprint on an organization, change it. Um, and so that happens all the time, right? So I am adept. I'm someone like, listen, I'm always the person that tell me what I got to do and I'm going to do it, right? I will call myself almost like a soldier. You listen, you tell me something. If I don't agree with it, I will tell you, hey, look, maybe we should do this, that, or the other. But once I know the march is forward, and I've said, you know what, I heard if we go left or right, that might be better. And you go, we talking, but we're going forward. If you're a person of authority, then I'm going to go forward.
Mhm.
And that's that. And so for me, that takes stress off because that's not my battle,
Mhm.
right? In my own personal life, I've had to learn too with children. I know anyone with children will agree with me that, especially as they grow up, I had this incident when my daughter was looking to, um, she was in her last year of high school. She played basketball. She was a starter, and our school zone changed. So she, had great grades and she had all this plan what she wanted to do. And when our zone changed, it turns out the high school we were going to be zoned to, the coach wanted her to play and she wanted to go play there. And I was like, we're not even having a discussion. Why would you change schools in your senior year to go to another school, right? Long story short, I was like, I'm not even talking about it. My husband's like, what do you mean you're not talking? I'm like, we're not even talking. No, I'm not talking. And my daughter sat down and put together a whole presentation for me and a list of the pros and cons of why she should go to that school or shouldn't. And she came in my room and they said, Mommy, I want to talk to you. I know you said you didn't want to talk about it, but I want to talk to you about me going to this other school. And I want to explain to you why it's a good decision and what I'm going to do to make sure the concerns you have are addressed. And when she said that, it arrested me because it was like, wait a minute. If she went through all of this, because I just was like, I know what's better. But she said that she might have said one thing. I don't even know. I said, stop right there. If you went through an analysis like that, I don't need to hear it. You go there.
Let me bring something to your attention. What you missed in that was that's your child.
Mhm.
And you said earlier when we started the discussion about the fruit that you bear.
Yeah.
You also said when you were around 12, you realized you had to take the matter in your own hand.
Mhm.
Your daughter did exactly what
Yes.
you had done.
Yeah. And, I never thought of it that way. That is so insightful. But what it taught me too was, okay, you said all that, but somebody came with your daughter came with an analysis for her.
Mhm.
And it was a moment that would allow me to help her realize her voice was important. I didn't know all that at the time, but I just felt so strong that if you go through all of that in the 11th grade to go, if you put and she came with pen and paper and just funny, she's my child in that way. If you do all that, then you've thought it through. And then what I also said to her too was, this is how it's going to be. You're going to that school because I don't need to hear anymore. And I am standing beside you and behind you. I don't care what happens. Even if it turns out that something's not right, I will not mention it. I will not say, I told you, none of that. And I said, we are both in agreement. Oh, I knew I was saying that on purpose, that this is your decision and this is what we're going to do. And I'm in agreement with you. And it started, and at that moment too, it was helping me realize it was time for me to release my power as a parent and let her realize, give her that power to make decisions and feel comfortable about it.
What do you feel your purpose is? Your life.
Wow, I know my purpose. I am here. My purpose is to help people see their triumph in their tragedies through my service. As my husband said, I've heard him ask me, are you a king or a king maker? Because we were watching something. And I am a king maker. Yeah, I can do a lot and I aspire to all these things, but I can also help a lot right where I am and serve. And I don't need a title to be a leader. I am one. I learned that. So I am a kingmaker and I am helping people live their best life through the service I do at where I work. I'm working we have a Black employee resource group with the Women's Employee Community Board. At my church, my husband and I work in a couples ministry. We still learning when we working. We've been married 36 years and we're still, we are in the ministry learning and leading. And anywhere you will find me, even with my friends, the first thing I want to do is be of service to you. If there's something I can do to help lift you up, or if I can be of any example at all. And we talked a little bit about the literary work I have coming, but that work is a greater gift to humanity, as I've said, in terms of telling the story in a way, in a public forum, so that there can be some good given to so many people, because we all have tragedies, every last one of us. Another way to process it after you figured out what happened to you.
So let's connect the dots. And,
Mhm.
a series of this goes through the whole what happened to you method, but let's connect the dots. How did
Absolutely.
you get to recognize your purpose?
Actually, about 3 years ago or 2 years ago, I actually took a course, Finding Your Purpose. And what was funny, there was a lady, I want to say it was in the beginning of the pandemic, so maybe 2 years ago. She had this course I signed up before the pandemic. And I was actually going to cancel it. I'm like, who wants to do this now? We're not going to work. Someone said, well, go ahead and go. So I did it online. And then she's like, start writing down what you feel you're good at and this and that. And I was like, oh my goodness. And some people were reading off stuff right there. And I was like, it didn't come to me like that. But when I hung up, I started thinking about, what do you mean? What your purpose is? You are always helping people to be the best them they can be, right? The best version of themselves. And I do that a lot of times too, without words. I feel like I try to live a life of example through service. If someone says they're not feeling well, and I know you, I'm probably, my one friend, I had just met her here. She had come here. I was at her house cooking and folding clothes and helping her family, and no one knew about it because it was just, I do those things and I just do them quietly, and do those kind of things. And I've had good things like that done to me. So it's just a reflection of that. But my life is one, I feel like it's about service, and it's come crystal clear, is to help people get past some of these really tragic situations and realize there's something more. And I really didn't start telling what happened to me until a couple of years ago. And every time I told someone, they would go, "Oh my gosh, when I look at you, I don't see that." And that's the other thing, some of the bling and the shiny new bright object, um, people will think, you know what, they see you now, but there's more that's in here. So if this helps you see where you can get to, like, whoa, I can't believe that happened to you, then I need to tell my story, because someone will say, wow, I would have never guessed that.
You don't wear what you've been through.
That's right.
Um, you work, we talk about corporate America,
Mhm.
and when you see people coming to work, when you see women coming to work, they bring their whole body, their whole self, all of them into the workplace. For some people, it's very hard to separate their personal lives from their business or their professional.
Yes.
So they come in with all their stuff,
Yes.
right? How are you able to help women separate the two?
I don't know. In some cases, first of all, I feel like, one, I always, even in my company now, women come in young, I reach out, "Hi, I'm Renee. Welcome. If you ever need anything." When we were in the office, if someone new came, I would, go introduce myself and say, "Hey, if you ever have any questions, let me know." I always make myself available and approachable. One, and two, sometimes people will look at me and go, "Oh man, you don't know what I'm going through. You look all perfect." And I'm like, "No, I'm not perfect." I've had women reach out to me with, "Hey, I have a sick child at home. I need to work at home more. What should I do?" And I help them put together a business plan to do that. I reach out to people who I understand may be going through something, and just reach out, "Hey, I was thinking about you, and is there anything I can do?" Sometimes just calling people, but I'm not afraid to do that. And I look at it as part of who I am. Is part of me is always, to reach out, to show I have empathy. I can listen, and reach out and let people know another human being is here, and they're interested in you, and they would listen and hear you, and how can I help you? And when you do that, it's amazing how many people will come to you and have come to me. And I mentor women all the time, all the time. And it could be about, "Hey, how do I handle this?" And a lot of times when my children were younger, corporate America, in my opinion, then they really didn't want to hear about your children. They wanted you to come to work, and I felt like, that pressure you feel. I didn't talk about, I mean, I said I had children. I didn't tell them, I had a child sick, I had a child in the hospital, whatever. I just sucked it up and turned in my work and dealt with it. So as much as I can help another woman feel like they have someone rooting for them, and I say that to the women I'm with, "I'm rooting for you. I'm rooting for your success." I say that out loud to women that I mentor all the time. I am rooting for them. And I think people know when you mean that.
How would you define, or how would you assist in that capacity? Because if they're coming to you, that means you're hearing a lot about what has happened and what is happening to them.
Yes.
How do you navigate them in a way that they're able to get that support? Because a lot of
Mhm.
times people feel like, okay, you're saying that out of your mouth, but what are you really going to do to help me? So
Mhm.
how you help them to navigate? And I'm talking about the ones where you hear the trauma, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times what I find in my work, Renee, is that people have not dealt with that. People can have problems, but then when they start to unpack, at the very core of that problem, there has been some type of trauma that occurred and the light bulb come on.
Yes.
Because you're able to recognize trauma, how do you stir that into another direction?
Yeah. So, Dr. Glennis, one of the things that I've been doing the last couple years is as I'm talking to women and other men, and we get to that kind of thing, I say, have you looked at the employee assistance program?
Mhm.
Have you looked at getting some counseling and some help? You might be stuck in a situation that we talk about. You said something happened. Sometimes women say they're going through a divorce, they're trying to do this, they're trying to do that, some, different situations. And I tell them, go get help, go get the resources. But I also tell them, put together a plan. What is your plan? So you are coming at this from a place of strength. I think when you sit down and think of a plan, for example, okay, how I have a child, I'm going through this situation. What am I going to do for the next 2 months? How I'm like, go find out how much vacation, find out if you take a leave of absence. So it's about knowledge is power too. Sometimes just having someone to talk sense with you and talk informational, and they'll be taking notes, and then they go find that out, and they'll come back, thank you so much, you know what, I found out the best course for me is to take a leave of absence for 2 months, and this is the plan, and I've talked to my manager. Sometimes what happens is, again, stress is what, wanting something to be different than it is. No, it's not different. Whatever's happening is happening. So once you acknowledge it and try and gather as much information as you can, and then make a decision that's best for you, I feel like you're coming from a position of strength. And that's when people are living their best life.
And I'm so aware, I'm so passionate about this, and I'm telling you, I did not ever want to see anybody in a workplace having to face what I faced when I was there. I was having to
Yes.
carry my burdens of a very difficult marriage. I carried my burdens of um, going through a divorce. I was a single parent at one point. Just a number of things that I was going through, but yet tried to continue to stand in these professional shoes, right? I tried
Yes.
to continue to walk no matter how much I had to mask it. I still wanted to obtain that. And
Yes.
I vow, and sometimes I say to myself, I really believe that there was an opportunity in there, because I even had I would do prayer while I was at work. Because one thing I recognized was I was not the only one who was going
Yes.
through something, and I did a prayer. I think we did about 15-30 minutes or something. And then when I went to another division, I found out there was a Bible study on site. And
That's
I went
right.
to the Bible study. And I'm like, there's got to be something instituted. I know there's EAP, but a lot of people don't even want to reach out to EAP.
No, they don't trust it. There are some people that don't trust it. I just believe in the end, as long as you feel like you have evaluated all the options and you have all the information in front of you, then you make the best decision. You are good with that for most people, right? And that's the difference, versus, okay, I'm gonna keep letting this happen. And next thing I'm on a performance plan. And next thing someone's tossing me out the door.
Right.
And a whole time someone's like, why didn't you tell me? You're like, well, I didn't want to bother you. So it's more of coming at us, even, and this is just in life in general, coming at a trauma, a situation, a challenge by having all the information that you can muster and some wise counsel. Sometimes somebody you can bounce it off of that may bring things to your attention you didn't even think of, right? And sometimes I'm just that ear or that wise counsel to somebody who hasn't thought of everything, and we just bounce things, and I'm like, look, go home, pray about it, think about it, and then chart your path. I think those things are helpful a lot of times when you are going through a trauma or a tough time in your life. Sometimes it's hard to just do the things you might normally do.
Mm-hmm.
And to have that other person to go, hey, have you thought of this? Hey, why don't you do this? Have you thought of a leave of absence? Sometimes you don't even think about it. Or
I tell you something else too, though, Renee. I think that people need to be aware, just like your medical record follows you.
Oh, yeah.
When you go to counseling, they need to ask questions about what
Oh, that's,
happened,
yeah.
because you don't want, although things are confidentiality, um, eh, you might go apply for another job.
And that's, yeah. And again,
That counseling,
yeah, bring your whole self to work. And that's where I always joke and say it's really hard to bring your whole self to work sometimes, because sometimes there are so many other forces at work. But I believe if you look at your life and what's important to you, and you gather information and you get some wise counsel, and you come at it from a position of this is my decision, I believe you stand in your strength, and that helps you to feel like I can forge a path forward.
Mhm.
I really do.
Yeah, because people have to have that sacred, safe space. You gotta talk. Mental health is serious, and
Oh
you
my goodness.
gotta have
Yes.
a place to talk about this trauma. You gotta have a place to understand and figure out, how has the trauma affected me, right? And whether or not it's still affecting you, and how do I find a place to move beyond my traumatic experience so that I can have a life of fulfillment, and that's in your
Yes.
professional life. And I'm just waiting for that day that the corporate doors will open, that they have that on-site place that people can have that safe space, um, outside of EAP, that they
Yeah.
can have that safe space that they can go into and knock on that counselor's door or that coach's door, that they can empty themselves, to not keep trying to carry that load.
I agree with you. I hope it's coming. I tell you, the other thing I've been doing, again, because I've had the position to do it in these last few years, is I do a lot of executive one-on-ones, but they're more around talking about the situations that and circumstances that people face, biases and unconscious biases, and coming up with tangible things that we can do to improve the experience of women and employees in the workplace, and leadership training, and or creating a pathing for first line managers for women, mentorship program. I can name quite a few of those things that I have put my finger on to create where I'm at, to make, again, the women and men and people I work with live their best lives.
Yeah.
And so that, I leave a legacy from wherever I leave that says, these are the things I did. Do people know that I do them? No, I don't need them to know, because that's what the service is about. Some do, but they are recipients and beneficiaries of me, again, being a kingmaker where I'm at. And I know that's my calling. So I'm not trying to get something out of it. I'm trying to give something.
Right.
And that makes me feel great. And I am living in and enjoying my calling, because that's what I'm supposed to be. That's why I'm here. That's my purpose. And since I've been really embracing it and living in it the last couple of years, my fulfillment has been off the charts. I am truly blessed and happy, and I just have so many more people to serve, and my purpose has so much more to accomplish. I'm excited.
Wow. And I am too. Renee, it has been such a pleasure, to talk with you tonight. This has been so enjoyable. And I think we probably could have gone on and on and on and on, because there's so much to talk about in
Absolutely.
context and on this subject, right? Um,
Yes.
I want to let everybody know, I want you guys to come back and join us next week, 8 o'clock p.m. here on Facebook Live in the group, where we will talk and interview Kathy McDade. And Kathy is going to come and we're going to share a lot of information about, transitioning in relationships. And we know a
Wow.
lot of times we can have some very, very traumatic experiences that occurs in relationships. So Kathy McDade is going to be with us next week. Renee, I always have a fun question at the end of our interview.
Uh-oh.
And it's funny. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to write down my response that I think you're going to say.
Oh, this will be good.
Okay. I can't show it, guys, but
Okay.
here, honestly, here is my response. One, is she going to say what I have on the paper? All right. So your fun question is, if you were an ice cream flavor, if you were an ice cream flavor, what would it be and why?
Woo! That is really good. Let me see. I'm going to go with butter pecan.
Oh, wow.
And I'm going to say because it's flavorful. It's a lot of times brown, but then there's some crunchy, pecans in there, that some depth, right? So that's what I'm going to say.
That's funny. I said vanilla.
I almost said vanilla because I'm playing, for people that know me, I'm not the big time risky. I'm not jumping off airplanes. I'm pretty like, I'll say boring, in a way, but I will say that about me though. There's other little pieces of me, little depths. So I'll give that to the pecans, but then the rest of it's pretty plain.
Right, right.
I am pretty, you got it though. What you see is what you get, pretty much.
But I said vanilla because of your spirit, because
Yeah.
I don't know, your softness,
Yes.
I'm sure you're caring. And I think that's why I went the route of
Karen, yeah, then I got that little pecan in there because it'll bite back sometime. Like I got that New Yorker, that little New York edge. It's funny. It's always there, but you can see it from time to time if you cross me sideways sometime.
Sometimes it gets triggered, right?
It'll get triggered. It takes a lot to take me down the road, but if you take me down there, you might get the pecan.
All right. All right, everyone. Don't forget, we asked you all to please go to our Facebook page and join our group, When Women Heal Community, and
Yes.
also go visit our website at whenwomenheal.com. We
Amen.
hope, pray, and trust that you all will have a very blessed week. And once again, Renee, thank you so much
for
joining me tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Glennis. It's been a pleasure.
All right, take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.